If you need to install Arch Linux in the UEFI mode with the GTP partition table, then watch this video and you will learn the most up-to-date installation of Arch Linux in a very concise video. I have already made a video tutorial on how to install Arch Linux, where I showed the whole process in less than 10 minutes. In that video, the installation was performed in the legacy mode with the MBR partition table, versus the UEFI mode and the GPT partition table in this tutorial. In my personal view, the installation of Arch Linux in the legacy mode is more conservative, it is simpler, and it is also more reliable. But many of you asked me to show you the tutorial on how to install Arch Linux in the UEFI mode. So unless you need or you really want to install your Arch Linux in the UEFI mode, I recommend you to go to that previous video and do the legacy installation. But if you want to learn more advanced features such as UEFI mode and the GPT partition table, or your hardware requires to perform the installation only in the UEFI mode, you need to follow this tutorial. Let's get started. First, you need to download the Arch Linux installation ISO. You go to the website archlinux.org, and here you can find the download link. You click on it. You can download either torrent if you know how to use torrent, or you can use some direct links here. Just find your country and click on any links here. Among all these files, you need to download the one which ends with .iso. Click on it and save it. When the ISO is downloaded, you need to write it to your USB flash drive and perform the installation. I have already made a video on how to create a bootable USB drive. You can watch it here. But in this tutorial, I will show you how to install Arch Linux in a VirtualBox, and this is what I also recommend you to do. Try to install Arch Linux in a VirtualBox first. This way you will practice and you will better know the whole process, so it will be easier for you to do the installation on the real hardware. So in VirtualBox you need to create a new machine. Here we give it a name Arch Linux. I usually give 2 gigs of RAM, but 1 gig is also fine. If you don't have enough RAM, you can also keep it at 1 gigabyte. And we need to create a new hard disk. Here keep it the default, the virtual disk image, dynamically allocated, give it 20 gigs, and if you want you can also click on this icon and change the location of this Arch Linux virtual hard drive. Next click create. So the virtual machine for Arch Linux is almost done, we just need to change some settings. Click on this settings icon. If you don't see this menu, for example if it looks like this, you just need to do right click here and select show toolbar. Next click on the settings. I will skip most of these settings except this system tab. Here you need to enable EFI mode, because we're gonna do the installation of Arch Linux in the UEFI mode. So we need to enable this feature in the VirtualBox. Okay, now everything is fine and we can start the installation. Just click on the start icon or just double click on this Arch Linux. Here you need to specify the path to the downloaded Arch Linux ISO. Or if you don't see this menu, you can also go to the devices here, optical drives, and choose the image. It will be the same. Next you just need to click reset here. And this is our Arch Linux installation. The boot process of the Arch Linux ISO image in the VirtualBox in UEFI mode is very slow. And this is normal, this is described in the Arch Linux wiki, so you just need to wait 1 or maybe 2 minutes. So now the system is loaded and we can start the installation process. The first thing we need to check is the internet connection. In this tutorial I use wired internet connection, and I also recommend you to use wired internet connection. To check if your internet works, you need to type ping. For example, you can do this ping 3 times and any website you like. For example, we can use Arch Linux. As you can see, ping works and the data is transferred, so our internet connection works fine. If it happens that you don't have wired internet connection and you have to use Wi-Fi, then you need to type Wi-Fi menu and run this command. So you will see a window looking like this, where you can choose the available networks. You type your password and you should be connected to your Wi-Fi network. But I still recommend you to go to some of your friends or somewhere else and find a wired internet connection, because during the installation you will need to download a lot of packages, so wired internet connection will be faster and more reliable. Next, let's list the available partition of our hard drives. You can use different commands here, but I will start with fdisk with option L. So in this particular case I have only two hard drives. The one is actually the ISO image here, as you can see, it's here. And another disk is SDA. This is the hard drive we just created, the virtual hard drive in this virtual box. So in your case, you may have also a real hard drive, and most likely it will also be called SDA if you have just one hard drive. If you have several hard drives, look at their size and define which one you want to use to install Arch Linux. So this hard drive doesn't have any partition table, so we need to create one. It's also possible that you already have a partition table, so you can skip this step. Just follow the steps after the partition is created. I will use the program cfdisk, and I want to partition the disk SDA. Here is the first difference from my previous tutorial, where I showed the installation in the legacy mode. I created a DOS partition table. In other words, it's the same as MBR partition table. But this is the installation in the UEFI mode, and the UEFI mode is also compatible with GPT partition table. And GPT partition table is more advanced. You can use it with the larger hard drives, and it is also more flexible in terms of number of partitions you can have on it. So let's select GPT here. So we have 20 gigs of space. Let's create a new partition. And the first partition we need to create is a UEFI partition. This is where the bootloader will be installed. It's enough to have 500 megabytes. You can see we have created one partition here, and we have 19.5 gigabytes of free. Let's create a new partition on this free space. You need to select it with your arrow keys and click new again. And we will make 10 gigabytes of our root partition table. This is a virtual machine, but if you install Arch Linux on real hardware, I recommend you to use at least 20 gigs. And the rest of the space we will use to create our home partition. So after that you need to write this table to your hard drive, type yes here, and quit. I will press Ctrl L to clean this screen, and list the partition again. You can go through the history of your commands with your arrow keys. If you press up key, you will see this command which we have typed before. Now the SDA disk has 3 partitions here, as you can see. We need to format them. So the first partition is the UEFI partition, and it needs to be formatted in a FAT file system. You type make fs fat with option F32 and the path to this partition, dev SDA1. Enter. So the FAT file system has been created on this partition, and the other 2 partitions I will format with ext4. Let's clean the screen. The next step, we need to mount our root and home partition. You type mount, and our root partition is dev SDA2, which needs to be mounted to MNT. Now it is mounted. Next we need to create a home directory. In the MNT folder, and mount the home partition, which is SDA3, to this home folder. Now we can list all the mounting points, and you can see that SDA2 is mounted to MNT and SDA3 is mounted to MNT home. For now we don't touch SDA1, which is our UEFI partition, we will use it later. So now we start the installation process. You need to type the command pacstrap with option I to see the information, and you install all the packages into the mnt where our root partition is mounted, and we will install base and base devel packages. For all this process you just need to select all and yes here. So this is the longest installation part of this video. I will speed up this part of the video to save your time, but in real world you will need to wait quite a while until all these packages are installed. So all packages have been installed, let's clean this screen. And the next we need to generate our fstab file. You type gen fstab with option U and option P, mnt, and everything will be saved to mnt etc fstab. If you are curious what the option U and P mean, you can just type the command with option help, and you will see the description of these options. Next we need to chroot to our account. So you type arch chroot, and we will chroot to mnt. So what it means that we will go to our newly installed system as a root user, but it is still mounted to mnt, so we specify the path to this directory, and we will also use bash here. So now we are located in the system we have just installed, because previously we were logged in as a user of the ISO file, but now we are logged in to the system we have installed. So if you type ls, you can see here the directories which have been just created during the installation process. We still need to do a few more installation steps here. First we need to set the locale. You type nano etc local gen. Enter, and here you need to find your locale. In my case I will use English yes. So this is nano editor. If you are not familiar, you can look here. If you look down you will see different options, and this is the option W. So if you press Ctrl W, you will be able to search for terms here, and we need to find option English US. Enter. And as you can see, it has found this option here. This is what we need. So we just remove this DS sign, and this is the locale which will be used on this system. Ctrl O to save, enter, and Ctrl X to exit from nano editor. Let's clean the screen. So and now you can generate the locale. You type local gen and press enter. So the generation of the locale is complete. Next we need to set the time zone for our system. You type ln, which will create a symbolic link. Use option SF, USR, share, zone info, and here you need to select the option which fits you. For example, if you press tab here, you will see all the available options. In my case I need to use Europe. Again, you can press tab here and you will see all the available cities here, and I will use Stockholm here. Next I will type etc and save this symbolic link to local time. Enter. The time zone is set. Now we also need to set the time. You type HW clock with option sys TOHC and UTS. Enter. So the time zone and the time are set. Now we need to set the host name. You type echo. Next you need to type the name you want to give to your computer. I will name it Arch PC, and it needs to be saved to etc host name. And we also need to add this name to our host name. You need to type nano etc hosts. Enter. And here you need to add this line 127.0.1.localhost.local domain, and the name of your computer. Arch PC in my case. If you use a static IP address, you need to replace this 127.0.1.1 with your static IP address. In this case it is a dynamic IP address. Ctrl-O to save and Ctrl-X to exit from Nano Editor. So next, we need to enable the network. So again, this is only for the wired internet connection. Unfortunately, I don't have a Wi-Fi card on this computer, so I cannot show you how to set a Wi-Fi. So just go to Arch Linux Wiki and look how to set a Wi-Fi if you have Wi-Fi only. So we need to install Network Manager. To do that, you type pacman with option S and the name of the package, Network Manager, and install all the needed packages. After the installation, enable it. Type systemctl, enable, and here it is important you type Network Manager with the capital, and Manager also starts with the capital as a one word. Enter. So this will create some symbolic links which will launch a Network Manager during the boot of your system. Now we need to set a root password. It is as simple as typing the command passwd and type your password blindly here. You see nothing when you type. You type it once and repeat. So the password is set. So the next step is the most crucial step. This is where we will install our group bootloader, and this is the step where the installation process of UEFI mode is very different from the legacy mode. First we need to install all the necessary packages. Type pacman with option S and install group and EFI boot mgr. Yes. Now create the EFI directory, which will be located in our boot folder with the name EFI, and mount the EFI partition to this directory. If you remember, the EFI partition of this system is dev SDA1. This is 500 megabytes partition we have created at the very beginning, and it will be mounted to boot EFI. So you can check the mounting point with the command ls-blk, and here you can see that SDA1 partition is mounted to boot EFI. We can start the installation of the group. You type group install. Again, this group installation command is different from the legacy installation, so be very careful with all the options you type here. In the option target you need to specify x86_64 EFI. Then you need to specify the bootloader ID. You can give it any name, I will use group here, and I also recommend you to use the same name, this way it will be easier for you to follow this tutorial. And the last option is EFI directory, which will be the directory we have just created. Boot EFI. Just make sure that all the options are typed correctly and press enter. So as you can see, the group has been installed with no errors, which is very good. Now we need to generate the config file for the installed group bootloader. You need to type grub make config with option O. This is where the config will be outputted, and it should be located in boot group.cfg. Enter. So the group bootloader has been installed, and basically the minimal installation of Arch Linux is finished for now. And if you install it on real hardware, in most of the cases your system should work fine after all these steps. But unfortunately EFI mode doesn't work really well in a VirtualBox, and also on some hardware you may have some problems. So we need to do some additional trick with our bootloader to make sure that our system always boots. Again, this is another step why I think that UEFI installation is more complicated and it is trickier than the legacy installation, because after the legacy installation we would have finished at this step. But here we need to do some additional configuration with the bootloader. Make directory boot EFI EFI with capitals, and boot directory is also with capitals. Created. Now we need to copy grub bootloader we have just installed to this newly created directory. And then you copy, you also need to rename it. So the name of this bootloader will be boot x64 EFI, all capital letters. This is a bootloader which will be recognized by EFI during the boot system in case it fails to boot from the original bootloader. So we have copied our bootloader to this boot folder, and to be even safer, we can also create a startup script for EFI. To do that you need to type nano. This script will be located in boot EFI, and the name of the script is startup.nsh. And here you need to type this line: bcf boot add 1 sf0 column, and here you need to use reverse slash. So usually in Linux you use this slash, but here we need to type another slash, which is a backward slash, I think. You type EFI grub x64 EFI. So here I type the path to the grub we have just installed. I just use the backward slash in this case. And you can give a name to this boot entry. For example, you can name it my grub bootloader. Enter and type exit. So be very careful that you type everything as you can see on this screen. Ctrl O to save these changes and Ctrl X to exit. So now you can type the command exit, so we will exit from this chroot account. Next we can unmount all mounted partitions. To do that we do recursive unmount from mnt and reboot. Hopefully after the reboot you will see this group welcome screen with Arch Linux installed. And now as you can see we have booted in our Arch Linux system. So this is a very minimal installation of Arch Linux. There is no graphical environments yet. But don't worry, you are just few steps away from the finalizing this installation. Before we continue to the next step, if this tutorial is useful for you, consider subscribing and activate the bell notification so you won't miss any new video. So to log into your system you can only use the root account because this is the only account which we have created on this system. You type root and you need to type the password which you created during the passwd command. So now we are logged in to our Arch Linux system with the root account. And the first step would be logical to create a user account, because it's a not good practice to always work from the root account. You type user add with option M, G, users. So the main group will be users, and we also need to add optional group which is will. And we will use Bash shell environment, and here you give the username for your account. In my case it's average Linux user or ALU. Enter. If you are curious about all these options you can type user add with option help, and you will see what the options I use in this command mean. Create a password for newly created user. Just type passwd and the name of your username. And type your password twice. Next we also need to enable sudo privileges for our newly created user. To do that you type editor with all capital letters, nano, and vsudo. Enter. And here you need to scroll down with your arrow keys and find this line which says will all equal all and uncomment it. Ctrl O to save and Ctrl X to exit. Now we can exit from our root account and log in as a new user. If you type your username, enter, and the password you have just created, you should be able to log in to your user account. and as you can see, it has this $sign instead of a DS sign. So this means you're logged in as a regular user, not as a root user. To make our system usable, we need to install a few more packages. We will install Audio, X Windows System, XFCE Desktop, and Login Manager. And I will also install VirtualBox guest utilities. If you do this installation on VirtualBox, do the same. If you install your Arch Linux on real hardware, you don't need to install this last package. I will copy this command into the description. Enter, and here select all. So here, if you have NVIDIA graphic card, you can select the second option. In my case, I have Intel video card, so I will select the first option. And in this step for VirtualBox, it is recommended to use the second option. So as you can see, it will install many packages, so we say yes here. And this is the second part where installation takes quite some time, so again I speed up this part of the video. So the packages are installed and we are just 2 steps away from the finalizing our installation process. Now we need to create a X initiation file. You type echo and in the quotations exec start XFCE4. So if you install any other desktop non-XFCE, you will need to use another command here. I copy all the available desktops and corresponding command for this part in the description. And you need to save it in your home directory with the name .xinitrc. Enter. And we also need to enable the login manager. Again, systemctl, enable. This is the same way as we enable the network manager. lightdm. Okay, it requires root privileges, so just type your password. So everything worked fine. At this step, I also recommend you to run the command startx to test if your graphical environment works. So the graphical environment works fine, and this is the XFCE desktop with a minimum install. I will use the default panel here, and as you can see, there are almost no packages installed in this system. So let's shut down our system. Go to the settings of Arch Linux, and in the storage you need to remove Arch Linux ISO. Just click remove attachment. OK. And let's try to boot from the newly installed Arch Linux. This is the lightdm login screen, which is not configured yet, so it doesn't have any wallpapers, that's why it's black. You type your password, and you will be logged in into your XFCE desktop. As you have seen, the UEFI installation process is a little bit more complicated than the legacy installation. But everything is moving towards UEFI, so sooner or later we will all have to install our Arch Linux in the UEFI mode. By the way, if you want me to do another tutorial on how to configure XFCE desktop on Arch Linux, please give this video a like. If it gets more than 500 likes, I will make a follow-up tutorial on how to configure XFCE desktop in Arch Linux. But I have already made a video tutorial on things to do after installing Arch Linux. You can click on it somewhere here on the screen, and I also showed how to configure the KDE desktop on Arch Linux. It also should be on the screen. Thank you for watching.